Really excited to have Court back. This is one of my favorite lectures every single semester, and Court is super gracious with his time to come back. I'm going to blow his horn a little bit for a second, just tell you, because he won't do it on his own, but I want to tell you, I found Court 7, 8 years ago. He actually lived in Dallas, which surprised me when I went to find the foremost authority on augmented reality. And I was really fascinated with sort of these emerging technologies, and lo and behold, he was in my neighborhood. And so we struck up a friendship. I guess maybe we both nerded out a little bit on AR. And Court has been early on a lot of emerging technologies, and he's not going to limit his discussion today exclusively to AR, though that will be a big component of it. But we're going to be talking futurescape. And I think today is sort of a super important opportunity for you to just do some dream work and to think about the ways in which these technologies could impact not only your opportunities as an entrepreneur, which of course is the flagship of what we're doing here, but I think maybe even more importantly, just to understand the impact of these technologies on your life and whatever kind of career path you choose, because you guys are going to see more disruption in the life of your career than anyone. And you can embrace that as opportunity, or you can cower in fear in the corner. I don't advise the latter. But the change, irrespective, is coming. And so what you make of it will be yours. And I think Court's vision on all of this is really exciting. He was also, I should tell you, the early investor in Mateo, which was a company that Apple bought as sort of the foundation or kernel of their AR strategy. So he goes way back. He'll touch that a little bit, but you do have a true authority on these emerging technologies here with us today. So let's give a warm virtual welcome, Court. Great to have you again, my friend, and we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me, as always, Mark. I'm actually the least technical person in the world, so let's see if I can.
He also, by the way, is not a great entrepreneur. So he will have some interesting perspective. Unlike a lot of the other guests who are here to show you how great they were as entrepreneurs, Court has a little different tack, but I can assure you, nonetheless, it will be very enriching. So, Court, you want to just give us a little background on you, or you got that in your deck?
It's in the deck. Yeah, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a son of an entrepreneur, so I got to see what entrepreneurs look like, and it took me a while to figure out I'm not one. But I'd also say this: I actually have a crazy Michael Jackson story that if y'all want to hear at the end,
yes, please.
Give it. It's maybe more bizarre than my talk, but that's a hard thing to beat. But if you're ready, I'm ready.
Yeah, no, let's hear it.
All right, guys. Again, it is an honor to speak to you all. And this is actually the 7th year Professor Bunting has had me speak to his class about augmented reality, also known as AR. Well, let me make sure the video is, you said you wanted it to, I don't know how to do that.
When you go to share screen, when you went to share screen, did you click those 2 boxes at the bottom?
I didn't see them. Is it okay so far?
Yeah, just unshare and then share again. And click those boxes because it will help optimize your audio and video if you want to stop share and then do it again. And should be 2 little boxes in the lower left.
I don't see them. I think we'll be okay.
Okay. All right.
Oh, there I see him. There we go. Now I got it, Mark. You're ahead of me.
That's all right.
All right. Sorry for the false start there. So what I was saying is that Mark's brought me to speak to you guys for 7 years in a row, and my talks about AR. But this shows you that Mark has always been ahead of the curve because he was looking at this way before most people. But the funny thing is, I'm sure Mark will agree with it. Every time I come back, my talk gets a little weirder and the scale gets a little grander. You all are in luck today because this will be my most bizarre talk as the future is racing towards us faster and faster for reasons I will explain shortly, while I give you my brutally honest thoughts of what lies ahead. We're going to talk, tell me something that is true that no one else agrees with. This is the contrarian question Peter Thiel asks, who is the first investor in Facebook and author of maybe the greatest business book as founders when he meets them. And we're going to talk a good deal about truth to start, because when you know a truth others don't, you have an edge. And when you have an edge, you have a chance as entrepreneurs to beat the efficient market. And I want to give you a few truths that most people are not aware of to help give you that edge. A simple truth can really blow your mind. We humans have a very complicated, relationship and history with truth. We often have a really hard time accepting truth. We have an even harder time revising our beliefs when new evidence requires us to re-examine and, dare I say, change our mind. If you take away one thing from me today, it's this. It's best to always have an attitudinal disposition based on new evidence. Belief revision based on new evidence, no matter how radically different than your current beliefs. And to quote one of my favorites, I promise you, if you do take the risk for thinking for yourself, much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come your way. Every position I argue today, I am sincerely open to revising my beliefs based on new evidence. And I hope you are as well, because I'm going to try to change your mind a great deal today. And I don't just say this for shock value. While I believe you've been well prepared for the next decade, you have likely not been prepared for what happens after. But don't worry, we're going to fix that today. What's going to happen to our society over the next 30 years will be so strange, it's going to be very hard to comprehend. And that's why we must first focus on how we come to truth. Because if I don't show you the method to my madness, you're not going to believe my tall tales. And I'm kind of obsessed with finding truth. Who am I? Well, besides the fact I have an eccentric wife, I'm a venture capitalist. But I'm really just a daydreamer that stumbled upon a few parlor tricks that I think will help you in whatever you end up pursuing, regardless of the particular subject matter today. The subject matter today is about a few new technologies, specifically AR, artificial and augmented intelligence, and how they will impact you and all your opportunities they will present as entrepreneurs. But I hope you take much more than that. We're going to lay out a foundation first to explain how we got here and why we got here so we can better understand where we're going. So the first 20 minutes, we're not even going to talk about AR. And there are going to be parts where you're going to think, where is he going with this? But pay attention, because while the beginning is going to be strange and slow, the scale of my talk will be moving in an expanding manner. And by the end, we'll be rolling fast as Bijan Robinson. I'm going to also try to sneak in as much philosophy as I can, because critical and abstract thinking will only become more important as we're about to enter this brave new world. Well, what is philosophy? At its most basic form, it is the love and pursuit of wisdom. And a very important part of obtaining wisdom stems from having a reliable means of obtaining truth. And you've heard this saying 1,000 times, how you think is more important than what you think, which is why we're going to first cover 3 seemingly unrelated concepts that are actually essential to be prepared for this new emerging frontier. And they are epistemology, first principle thinking, and exponential growth. And I'm actually dumbfounded that we don't cover these subjects in schools. Throughout history, there have been many different methods to try to find truth. And the name of this section of philosophy is called epistemology, which is just a $2 word, which means how do we know what we know? Of all the epistemologies, 2 have stood out far and above the rest: science and reason, and definitely not critical theory, which is junk. Science has gotten a really bad rap recently with politicians who've strawmanned it and used it as a fallacy of authority. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the science that makes your cell phone work. The real scientific method is amazing for 2 reasons. First is that it has a self-corrective mechanism built into it, which corrects our thinking when our hypotheses are wrong. And secondly, science gives us the magical power to predict the future. If I drop a pin, we can all predict which direction it would go. Science lets us break down very complicated, vast processes into much smaller parts, which in turn are predictable. And when we can predict how the most basic parts operate, we can extrapolate from there and predict how systems will perform at larger scales and make more complex predictions about our future. Another way of describing breaking things down to their core and then deducing up from them is called first principle thinking. And first principle thinking is the main parlor trick I want to teach you all today, because it's an amazingly powerful tool to predict the future for any business. First principle thinking is about finding the essence of an object below the surface by breaking it down to its most basic truth. Steve Jobs is a master of first principle thinking, and so is Elon Musk. Most humans rarely look below the surface, but things are rarely as they seem. But through first principles, you can see the world in a whole new light, and it can give you an edge by giving you insight about what could eventually disrupt it. So let's take a random company like American Airlines, and let's look at it from a first principle perspective. What business are they in? Well, if you think their primary business is travel, you are wrong. Yes, many of their customers use planes to go on vacation and visit friends and family, but their main customers are businessmen and businesswomen. American Airlines is not in the travel business, they are in the trust business, and their leaders blew a huge opportunity. Their competition is not Southwest, it's Zoom. Americans should have been working on Zoom for years. If they had, they would be worth more than all US airline carriers combined. Those meetings happening on Zoom are customers that are never coming back, because on Zoom, you can get almost the same level of trust and meeting of the minds as being on site. Had Americans' management thought in first principles, they would have not been disrupted. You must not look at businesses as means, but as ends. What problem are you really solving for your customer? As a founder and management of a business, you have a fiduciary responsibility only to increase and protect shareholder value. How you do it does not matter, and you should always be on the lookout for new tech that could eventually disrupt your current means of helping your customer, even if it means cannibalizing your existing business, and this is known as the innovator's dilemma. If you have the wrong assumption about the future, the market will correct it for you, because like science, a true free market is another example of an epistemology that has a corrective mechanism built into it. In the book, The Undercover Economist, Tim Harford describes the free market as a world of truth. The free market has given us all standards of living that we could never have dreamed of, not even kings could have 100 years ago. And I promise you, none of you would want to trade places with the richest man 100 years ago. And Jeff Bezos would do anything to be an average Jane 100 years from now. The world is better by almost every objective measure. So look at this chart. The economist Friedrich Hayek calls this the knowledge problem, and is an example of what happens when epistemology that does not have a corrective mechanism built into it interferes with a system that does. It leads to ignorant outcomes which create unnecessary suffering. And we've got to stop making this same mistake again and again, especially when the data is overwhelming which direction we need to go. If you want your startup to be successful and you want to live in a better world, you have to be open to revising your beliefs based on new evidence. Capitalism is the only economic system we know that can reduce poverty. And one of the reasons is because the harshness of a capitalist system best incentivizes businesses to improve their technology the fastest, which in turn raises the standard of living across the board for everyone. Technology is the great deflator. That smartphone in your pocket and the one that a kid has in the poorest part of the world's pocket would have cost $1 trillion the day your grandparents were born. In many ways, the world has never been more equally awesome. But being human, capitalism doesn't feel great. Why? As primates, we are jealous creatures that are too focused on the relative and not enough on the objective, which leads us to have a bias called pessimistic bias, which is why the news is always so negative and science fiction is usually dystopian. This bias has made us never satisfied, which is a double-edged sword of our own nature that has taken us to higher and higher levels of standard of living, which leads to the first principle of our own nature. Most of us are insatiable, wanting machines. As Sam Harris says, we suffer from hedonic adaptation, which means whatever may be spellbinding today will become mundane, expected, and unappreciated tomorrow. Times have never been better, yet we still yearn for more. And that is why we will do what we've always done, improve our technology, which leads to a major universal truth of our existence. It's that since the beginning, there has always been scarcity and suffering. We don't like suffering, small or big. Small stuff like the fact you will be hungry soon, or maybe you miss your family and they live far away, or big stuff like you know that one day you will die and so will everyone you love, or the fact that you will soon having to play Alabama every year. So what has our species done to deal with this truth? We found many different paths to deal with this problem of suffering, from metaphysics to meditation, and last to not least, tools. Metaphysics gives suffering purpose, and promises to balance the score when the game is over. And meditation tries to convince you that the self is an illusion to reduce desire and therefore suffering. As entrepreneurs, you are missionaries in the fight against suffering, because by building companies from selling popsicles to makeup, you are reducing suffering. not only by creating wealth or solving other people's problems, but by creating tools that push the boundaries of the current state of the art. One of the leading causes of human suffering is ignorance, but thanks to science, we have found an epistemology that moves us away from ignorance and towards enlightenment. The fruit of science labor is technology, and another word for technology is tools. Tools reduce suffering by augmenting our control over our world. Tools like when you are hungry or miss your parents later, you can press a button on your phone. Or tools like if you have anxiety about aging or death, we will talk about later, but it is still not all rainbows. The SEC will always be brutal. If you wanted to summarize my talk, it really comes down to two first principles of our relationship with tools. First, we are tool builders that are never satisfied with how potent our tools are. And secondly, we are never satisfied with how quickly we can access our tools. When I say potent, I mean leverage and control over reality, which brings us back again to science. Science upgrades our technology, which gives us even better understanding of how the world works, which again improves our technology, which becomes a perpetual cycle of improvement, giving us more and more control over reality. And on a side note, if you're currently concerned about global warming, it may mean you don't have a good understanding of where our potent technology is taking us because you don't understand what exponential growth means, which we're going to discuss now. The law of technology that best describes our desire for increased potency is Moore's law. In 1965, the co-founder of Intel saw a pattern that every 18 months, we were able to process information twice as fast, exponentially. Exponential growth is very hard for us to understand, but luckily we have learned that evidence is more reliable than our biases and intuitions. It's hard for us to comprehend the implications of exponential growth because yet we have another cognitive bias, not implicit bias, don't fall for that ad hominem, but a real bias called exponential bias. We are biased against exponential change because our brains spent thousands of years on the plains of Africa only concerned about what was linear and local. But that's not how technology's progress works. It's exponential and global, which confuses us because technology's growth appears linear at first. It always starts out very slow, but eventually moves so fast that it becomes unfathomable. Exponential bias hinders us from comprehending how much and how quickly technology is going to change our world. In our lifetime, magic and dragons will return to our realm. And if you think I'm making an analogy here, I am not. The futurist Ray Kurzweil likes to tell a fable to explain why Moore's law is so important. And this fable shows the difference between exponential growth and linear growth, and it's salient if you understand the difference. Once upon a time, a king challenged a farmer to a game of chess, and he told him he could name any prize he wanted. The farmer asked to be paid in rice, and his terms were that they would use the chessboard as a payment schedule. And on the first day, he would be paid in 1 grain of rice, but on the second, he would be paid 2, and the payments would double each day until the chessboard was full. Well, this is a really bad deal for the king and is a perfect example of exponential growth. If you grow in a linear fashion, you only get to 64 grams of rice on the last day. But if you double 64 times exponentially, by the last day, you get to 9 trillion tons of rice. So while Moore's law makes our technology more and more powerful, our human nature is not satisfied, and it demands that our technology also become more accessible. We can never access our needs to reduce suffering fast enough. Jason Silva says the lag time between our imaginations and their instantiations in the real world has become shorter and shorter. We are moving into our imaginations, and the distinction between reality and them is starting to disappear. If that sentence doesn't make you all excited, I don't know what will. The theme has not been show me the money. It's been show me the knowledge to make my desires become real as soon as possible. Everything we're going to talk about today related to AR comes down to one word: access. Our appetite for access is unquenchable. So now we're going to go back to the beginning of this first principle. And when I say back, I mean way back, like 500 million years ago. In the book In the Blink of the Eye by zoologist Andrew Parker, Parker argues the greatest inflection point in the history of evolution was the development of the eye, which single-handedly caused the Cambrian explosion. It's important to note this explosion did not occur after the development of the brain, but only after the development of the eye. The eye was the bottleneck because the brain could now access external information in real time. Remember, our computers have had processors for brains for decades. All right, so look at these charts. What does the eye, the internet, and AR all have in common? Well, they're all massive breakthroughs of increasingly efficient means of the speed at which organisms can summon meaningful data about the external world and act accordingly. And we've all experienced this law of technology in motion firsthand much more recently over the last half century in all its various mirages. For me, it started when I was in preschool. I was taught the most state-of-the-art way to access information was the Dewey Decimal System at the library. But when I got to elementary school, we were able to access information faster with desktops that had encyclopedias on them. In middle school, laptops came, and our ability to obtain information got quicker again because our computers became more mobile. When I was in high school, the internet and the search engine popped up, and that's when things got really interesting. The information in our computers was no longer isolated and static, and accurate information could now be accessed faster than ever before, and it changed the world. But again, we weren't satisfied in college. When I was in college, around the time most of you all were born, cell phones became the norm, and today we all have these smartphones, which has made the search engine even more accessible. All of these devices are apparitions. You just have to look beyond the camouflage for what they really are. They are just a path of a pattern of us never being satisfied with how quickly technology can deliver us relevant information, which is why we will all soon be wearing head-mounted displays, also known as HMDs. Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, said the amazing thing about them is that they reduce the time between intention and action. As Elon Musk has stated, our neocortex is just scaffolding evolution created to better execute the desires of our earlier limbic brain, which controls our basic emotions and desires for survival. Our devices are just a continuation of us outsourcing the limbic system's desire to better control reality. Who we are and what we do as a species is to augment. And that is why we will keep improving our tech and access to it, continuing to build scaffolding on top of scaffolding until the universe is at our fingertips. So back in 2009, I noticed this unacknowledged first principle of access, and I got really lucky because that happened to be the first year they ever had an AR convention. And there I found this German startup called Mateo, and I made my first venture investment because I thought I knew a truth that most people did not know was true. And 6 years later, we were purchased by Apple, and that startup became the foundation of all AR experiences you have from using Apple products and is now called ARKit. You see, the shape and the form of our devices continue to morph, but what they are doing does not. Your smartphone very soon will be AR-enabled glasses. Forget the fact that you're putting a computer on your face. You are just retrieving information one iteration faster than looking down at your phones. And just like each previous iteration, you won't know how you ever live without them because HMBs will be more addictive, more essential, and more fundamentally a part of who we are, which leads us to the next step of the pattern, hands-free, overlaying relevant information in our field of view. You know, you hear your parents and your friends make normative statements about how bad it is that everyone's glued to their phone and how we all need to get off them and back in touch with humans and nature. But when you're staring at your phone, you're doing about the most human thing you can do because that phone is simply augmenting the reach and scope of your brain, not only in the virtual world, but the physical world as well. However, they do have a point. Sometimes our tools' razor sharpness and their abundance can cut a little too deep and can cause harm like pain pills, social media, and gain-of-function DNA editing. So we must be very careful with the Frankensteins and Leviathans we create, and this theme will reoccur when we talk about AI later. So today you can ask me any question in the entire world, and I can pull out my phone and Google it, or better yet, I can stop talking to you all and I can ask Siri a question. And I should be able to retrieve the answer to any random fact in less than 30 seconds. So the big question is this as good as it gets? The search engine's like a genie. It's really powerful. It can answer any question, it can take you anywhere, and it can teach you anything. But the problem is our genie's been stuck in the bottle, and that bottle is your computer screen or your phone screen. AR lets the genie out of the bottle and gives you all the information and intelligence of the internet into the real world in real time, often before you manually query for it. Literally anticipatory computing. So now let's dive down into AR finally. Experts believe there have been 7 mass medias and that AR is set to become the 8th. They also believe, while it is hard to comprehend, that within 5 to 10 years, AR glasses will be as ubiquitous as iPhones are today. Augmented reality is a very foreign sounding term, so weird that when you talk with your parents and grandparents, you're going to get blank stares, trust me. However, the concept of VR has been mainstream since the 90s and is widely understood today. Virtual reality means just like it sounds. You're no longer in the real world, but you're fully immersed in a new virtual world. VR is going to be insanely awesome for education, collaboration, socialization, playing video games, and watching media, but you're shut off from the real world. However, with AR, you will look normal and it will add value in the real world. AR allows you to subjectively customize the world any way you want it to, just as long as it incorporates reality so you don't get hurt. You don't like the view from your apartment, then make it the Eiffel Tower. You don't like the color of my shirt, then change it to burnt orange. In other words, you can create an Instagram filter for how you experience all the world as you experience it. Again, it's 2021. You all have already experienced AR with face filters on Snap and Instagram, but only on the surface. While augmented reality are digital mirages in our world, their real value is so much bigger than these gimmicks. The real value of AR is not about just putting barfing rainbows in our field of view, but about accessing information faster than ever before. Yes, you are seeing virtual objects in front of you with AR, but those objects are just manifestations of information that we have never before been able to access in the real world in real time. AR is a revolution because, not because you have a Pokemon sitting next to you on a couch. AR matters because for the first time, AI will be working with us in real time. AR holograms are fakes. They are the Wizard of Oz. What really matters is the man behind the curtain, the AI. The AR is only as good as the AI behind it, assessing the situation and providing courses of action, and that is why it's imperative you understand AI as well. What I'm saying is that we are entering into a world of ambient computing, where AI is everywhere. AR does not just mean more stuff in our realities, but it means our realities can have more depth at UT and everywhere else. The entire world literally becomes a touchscreen. The whole world becomes anointed like the website Rap Genius. However, AR is not a new concept. It's been around for decades, but most people have never heard about it because the enabling technologies just have never been any good. But the difference is now the main bottlenecks are starting to disappear, which brings us back to HMDs. Those glasses don't turn you into Clark Kent, they turn you into Superman. Using AR on your phone is not cool. It's the equivalent of dial-up internet. It's only incrementally better than using your phone. The 0 to 1 tipping point occurs when we have the proper hardware for AR to reach its true potential, which is to seamlessly experience it hands-free. AR is the most elegant user interface ever imagined because it's the interface of the real world. It's a zero interface. It's the last screen you will ever buy. AR is not the Internet of Things. It's even better. It's the Internet of dumb things, an internet that makes dumb things smart, and the same could be said about its users. Pokemon through an HMD is incremental. I'm sorry, Pokemon through an HMD is not incremental, it's enchantment. And in the future, the crazy money is going to be behind consumer glasses. So if HMDs are so great, well then why did Google Glass fail? Well, Google Glass was the Newton of HMDs, too early for its time, and it contained all 3 of HMD's main bottlenecks. First, it was targeted towards consumers and it was ugly. If an HMD is so weird looking that there's a chance you're going to get wedgied on a locker for wearing one, you're probably not going to wear one. It's not foreign for us to wear technology on our faces. We've been wearing bifocals to augment our vision for 2,000 years. If we can get to a point where these HMDs become indistinguishable from normal glasses, there will be massive consumer adoption. And secondly, Google Glass did not have the processing power to do AR. An HMD without AR is like a computer or a web browser that does not have a graphical interface. It's just very limited, and vice versa. AR without an HMD is only slightly better than a QCAT. And you won't get this joke, but for extra credit, Google QCAT. The last bottleneck has to do with computer vision. Before your devices can do great AR, they have to be able to truly see and map the world to place virtual objects inside them. But the processing power required to do so has been impossible up until now. AR is really just a subset of CV and AI. We are now solving these technical hurdles, and it's going to lead to something marvelous. We crave omnipotence, and when accurate information can be accessed faster, productivity increases, which is why we've been striving towards this holy grail, to have perfect contextual knowledge in real time. When you bring an HMD and AI and AR together, it gives you something special that we have never before had in real time. It gives us prosthetic knowledge, meaning information that a person does not know but can access as needed using technology. And it's important we stop here and dig a little deeper. We are about to democratize knowledge. For the first time in history, information will be accessed so fast via discrete AR HMDs and hearables that from an outsider's perspective, your actual knowledge base will become indistinguishable from the prosthetic knowledge that you're demonstrating and communicating. Stop for a moment and try to let that sink in. AR is going to make us all to like MacGyver, and I'm totally dating myself with this reference, but MacGyver was a TV character and he would get in all these crazy situations and would have very limited resources to get out of them. But MacGyver was a genius because in every situation, he knew exactly what to do. AR makes us all MacGyver minus the hair, because when we wear these glasses, there's nothing we can't fix and nothing we can't do. Think about how revolutionary this is. Only 20% of the world's workers actually work at desks. Basic economics, skills have value when they are scarce. So when knowledge becomes ubiquitous, then what skills do we value? Our concepts of education and inequality may need to be reevaluated, and you may fear this is a Faustian bargain and society will have to pay a great price, because the marginal value of skilled labor goes to zero. Let's unpack this. I can hire an expert electrician with 20 years of experience or an unskilled day laborer, and they are now equal. My lights just went out. You can't see them. All right. They're now equal, and there's no need to pay a premium fee for the skilled worker. You just hand the unskilled worker the glasses, and he is instantly an expert, because when he looks at the electrical panel, there's going to be a virtual guide pointing out to him what to do step by step. It's like having a guardian angel on your shoulder giving you advice. AR is part of a much larger movement called Augmented Intelligence, which incorporates other real-time prosthetic knowledge interfaces such as natural language processing, also known as NLP. Augmented Intelligence is the most massive .com opportunity ever, and I want you all to be ant queens, because if you are not, you're likely going to be an ant drone. Because in the near future, almost every frontline job's workflow for any situation or interaction with a customer will be premeditatedly mapped out, and a frontline worker will just be doing what he or she is being told by the AI that they are wearing on them. So take advantage of this knowledge and use your imagination and think of some problems frontline workers have that could be solved with augmented intelligence. Maybe these videos that Microsoft debuted a few years ago might give you guys some ideas.
When you think about how you experience technology today, it's like behind this glass screen, and you're kind of stuck. It feels cold. We've unlocked the screen.
Really what we're trying to do is break down the walls between, technology and people.
This is the next generation of computing. This is the next PC.
Look around. Technology is all around us. We use it in every aspect of our lives. It enables us to do amazing things. But what if we could go further? What if we could go beyond the screen, where your digital world is blended with your real world? Now we can. This is the world with holograms. What will they enable us to do? New ways to visualize our work.
I have an idea for the fuel tank.
New ways to share ideas with each other.
How are things going your end? I just put the images in OneDrive.
Perfect.
More immersive ways to play. New ways to teach and learn.
So put the new trap in the place of the old one.
Now what?
And tighten here and here.
New ways to collaborate and explore the places we've never been.
Look at this formation.
Let's take a closer look.
And new ways to create the things we imagine. Because when you change the way you see the world, you can change the world you see. This is Microsoft HoloLens.
All right, so now you understand how we got here and what augmented reality really is and why it's so important. So now we're going to talk about how AR has been used in business in the past, present, and the future. Up until now, AR has probably been used only in advertising in very niche manners to either create a buzz around a product, provide additional information about a product, or speed up a product sales cycle. And a great way to create a viral buzz is a prank, and any prank you can imagine is possible with AR, as you can see in this Pepsi commercial. Again, reality can be very shallow. AR is a great way to let people who have found your product in your store learn more about it. The consumer no longer has to put down your product, pull up an app, or go to the internet to get more detailed information, reviews, or comparisons. AR can give you all that information without ever taking your eyes off the product. Or instead of having a physical product in your store, stores can now project AR to superimpose functionality and make a consumer's experience even better. AR can also be very helpful for online stores as well, because consumers can now try on and experience items virtually. You can now try on clothes 10x faster. After class, try to think of how some other brick and mortar and online stores could benefit from AR. AR has also been used in business to speed up a product sales cycle. And one example is IKEA. So a major problem consumers have when they're purchasing furniture is that even if they go look at the piece of furniture in the store, it's very hard to visualize how it will look and fit in their home. AR solves this dilemma and also makes all instructional manuals obsolete. But I actually have some real concerns about consumer use of AR in the near future because of safety. Before we can get to mass adoption, our CV is going to have to be so good that it'll be able to watch out for us as we walk down the street like a driverless car. Our HMDs are literally going to have to become our third eye to warn us from danger while we're focused on higher levels of thinking. And we're going to get there sooner than later. But we have a ways to go, and safety is not the only bottleneck. Which brings us to privacy. It sounds a little Orwellian, but to get to anticipatory computing, our devices are going to have to be constantly listening and watching what we're doing to give us the contextual information we want. But it's going to take some time. When you have a conversation with someone, there's an unwritten social contract that you are not wearing cameras on your faces recording each other. We will eventually rewrite this contract, but it's going to take a while. And that is why I'm pessimistic for consumer AR in the near future. But we're going to get there eventually, because for most people, convenience will triumph over our elected loss of privacy, because it's going to be too intoxicating having our needs met serendipitously in real time. We say one thing, but we do another. Your devices can't give you perfect personalization as you need it unless you open up to them. Privacy should have the highest standards, but at the same time, it should be beneficial for you to share. You think you care about privacy, but you care much, much more about convenience. And you always hear the same battle cry about how sacred privacy is and how technology is always ruining everything. But it's a worn out story. There is always an initial cultural pushback when a new tech is introduced. Over 3 billion people already make this utilitarian calculation every day when they use Facebook. Our desires for omnipresence outweighs our desires for privacy, and the same will be true for the omnipotence that AR will give us. And on a side note, Facebook and Amazon also fit perfectly into this pattern of access. Facebook is so addictive not because it's a social network, it's addictive because it's a personalized AI curated newsfeed that provides its users with access to relevant information quicker than they ever could access just by searching around the web themselves. Before we talk about where AR is going in the future, we're going to talk about the present just a little longer. What company has been the most disruptive marketing force created this century? Well, it's our genie, Google. It's the greatest mirage of all time. It's not the yellow pages. It's not a search engine. It's a bridge to an artificial brain. Google knows that it's going to have to incorporate CV and AR and NLP, or it soon will become antiquated because we're about to move into the post-search and post-app eras, moving beyond manually entering information into our search engine or manually asking our apps to summon us something. So how does CV and AR disrupt the search engine? Well, you go to a box on Google and you type in the object or the concept you're searching for and its context, and then you press return, and Google does its magic and it adds a few sponsored search results. Let's think about this from a first principles perspective. When you strip it down to its most basic form, it's the following. It's recognition and context precedes meaning or query. This is an a priori first principle truth for animals, and it's true for AI and search engines as well. So let's say there's an object in front of you. It's obvious your brain must first use its eyes to see that object and its context before it can create meaning. Well, what object are we looking at? Okay, well, it's a shark. What situation are we in? Are we behind glass in an aquarium, or is it next to us in the ocean? So only if the object's been recognized and placed in context can our brains create a query to give that object the appropriate meaning, such as, oh, cool shark, or oh, total panic. Google is no different, that it can't give a meaningful query without being supplied the object and its context. Say I approached a brain that was deaf and blind. What inelastic sum would that brain pay to have access to the real world? Computer vision makes it so you no longer have to manually supply the AI with the object and context, and therefore CV can contextualize and recognize a user's situation and therefore captures and owns the query. Back to our origination story, this is the Cambrian explosion of computing. CV is a huge part of recognition and context problem, but you can't get to perfect context without understanding spoken language. And this is done through NLP, which will eventually have something called augmented audio. And you'll soon be wearing a new type of wearable called a hearable, like Apple's wireless earpods. You see, the next time someone asks you a random question, such as what year was Bebo first introduced, your personal Siri in your ear will hear the question and it will whisper you the answer. You'll be like, oh, it's obvious, it's 1916. This is a massive game changer, another form of prosthetic knowledge, a decoy. You no longer know who is the actual expert or who is just repeating what the AI is telling Tim. I'm sorry, the AI in my ear said them. Today, we live in what is known as the app era. I know this is very hard to imagine, but very soon you won't be using apps. Blasphemy, I know, but it's true, because using a native interface in an app is not the fastest way to access information. The fastest way is through natural language, as you can see here. Using natural language is faster than using the best shopping apps by 3x. And 22 seconds is an eternity in mobile. And my children, they are 10 and 8 years old, and they will be the first generation that does not need to know how to read to query information. This will be their first default query interface. It will be voice. And this is a really big deal from an anthropologic perspective. It's seismic. You see, all the major players are investing in AI bots, which will be living in your messaging apps and in your virtual assistants, making them the new rulers of distribution with massive influence. By the end of this decade, it is predicted that most of the traffic on the internet will be bots communicating with each other. CV and NLP, they move the starting line and they replace the search engine as the origination point of the query and are the new kings of the jungle that will have the leverage to dictate the finder's fee and beat Google at its own game. The Amazon Echo is not a virtual assistant. It's the greatest Trojan horse of all time. Look beyond the sleight of hand. Amazon can now steal your query before it gets to Google. So in the near future, if your devices already know what you need before you manually ask them, then how do businesses reach their potential customers? We're going to enter a new age where sponsored searches go away and a new type of marketing emerges. I call it sponsored recognitions. The next time a new Volkswagen comes in your field of view, it will be highlighted in your AR glasses and it will tell you something cool about it, hence a sponsored recognition. Or maybe you and your friends are talking about where you're going to go have lunch after class and Alexa pipes in and tells you that Taco Deli is giving away free tacos today. If you want to win at marketing in the future, and you need to control what gets recognized, you need to be able to understand the consumer's particular context. So many people are worried that this AR is going to turn into this like hyper reality where banner ads are everywhere, which sounds incredibly annoying, but it's not going to be like that. These recognitions will be tastefully created and sporadic. It will be just like how you use Facebook and Google today. They show you sponsored content all the time and you don't mind because they give you so much utility for free. And the same will be true of AR HMDs. However, again, we are years away from mass consumer adoption, but that's not the case in enterprise HMDs. The party has already started and HMDs and wearables are already incredibly disruptive in business now. So one example is a company called TeamViewer that's helping many Fortune 500 companies augment their workforce. TeamViewer in 2020 bought a company called UbiMax, which is one of my portfolio companies, and now may become the Microsoft of the deskless worker and working in logistics, manufacturing, and repair, become way more efficient with way less training. This is the biggest enterprise opportunity ever. Again, 80% of the world's workforce does not work at a desk. So as you can see in these DHL fulfillment warehouses, they used to use handheld computers to pick items. But with TeamViewer's HMDs, it makes them hands-free and it makes their jobs easier because they're not constantly making micro decisions, but are now just mindlessly chasing dots, which gamifies their job and makes it fun. So not only are the employees happier, it makes them 30% more productive and it reduces their errors by half. Augmented audio is also blowing up in enterprise, and there's a startup in Dallas called Theatro, which I'm also invested in, and that has over 200,000 frontline workers in major department stores such as Walgreens, Home Depot, and Macy's wearing their hearable. Theatro's hearable gives frontline employees access to AI in real time without ever having to look down at a screen while they're interacting with customers, which makes them seem more competent with less training. This is the future of retail. It's paid recognition. When a customer asks which vacuum to buy, the associate will respond with the vacuum that has the highest paid recognition optimization. And that is why I am very bullish about a specific use case ROI deployment of AR HMDs and hearables in enterprise. And there are so many opportunities for entrepreneurs here. Again, AR is really just about AI in real time. So now we're going to talk about AI and its near future. The next generation of AI is something called artificial general intelligence, AGI. And it's likely coming next decade, and it will be the ultimate Rubicon that can never be uncrossed. And I hate to break your disillusion. It's not in the value proposition of college, but millions of gig workers already take orders from AI. Go here, pick this up, drop this off there. The AGIs in the future will just be providing even more specific instructions, likely in real time. The AIs, they're already smarter than us. They're just autistic. They're idiot savants. They have superhuman competency, but it's narrow and it's only good at things like chess with lower degrees of freedom. And more importantly, they lack comprehension. This new wave of AI won't have those limitations, and they will have very similar capabilities to us, and they may be even better than us at most tasks. Knowing which jobs that AI can and cannot do is half the battle. Knowing how to use these AIs will be imperative to be more productive as well. So don't let all this knowledge go in vain, and after class, make new plans and go out and learn more about AI to change the trajectory of your future. The future does not belong to coders, it belongs to liberal art majors and those who think critically and creatively. And also those who are bilingual, not those that speak Spanish and English, but those that understand their particular industry and also understand AI. In the near future, we should not be afraid of AI, but embrace it. AI is going to do away with a ton of dehumanizing repetitive work. Your jobs are going to be changing rapidly, and you need to understand how AI is going to affect whatever industry you plan on going into. More jobs will be created in the next decade than destroyed by AI, but you need to stay away from the jobs in the bottom left quadrant, those jobs that do not require compassion or creativity. Remember the term AGI. It's like how AR used to be. Very few people know its meaning today, but it will be everywhere tomorrow. The AGIs will soon be our co-workers, but when? You may be wondering how long it's going to take to crack some of the brain's current mysteries. So we're going to take a quick look at the history of the creation of nuclear as it is being recalled in this passage for some insight. Russell said in the interview, the consensus view expressed by Ernest Rutherford on September 11th, 1933, is that it would never be possible to extract atomic energy from atoms. So his prediction was never, but it turned out to be the case that the next morning, Leo's read Rutherford's speech, became annoyed by it, and invented the nuclear chain reaction meditated by neutrons. Rutherford's prediction was never, but the truth was about 16 hours later. In a similar way, it's quite futile for me to make quantitative predictions about when these breakthroughs in AGI will occur. Well, it is true we don't have an exact timeline for AGI, but we actually have a pretty good idea when it will arrive, and this actually leads to the last section of my talk. We actually could stop here because my main purpose was to come here today to really show you the power of first principle thinking and really explain to you what augmented reality and augmented intelligence is, and all the amazing opportunities there will be for entrepreneurs to make a killing in it. But part of being an entrepreneur is knowing how to survive, especially when the world is changing rapidly. So now we're going to look out a little further into the future to see how weird science, first principles, and exponential growth may take us next decade and beyond. If you've not noticed, I'm not a fan of trigger warnings, but this next part is scary and I don't have all the answers, but college is no place to be coddled. Like the alchemists, my forecasts are going to be outlandish and hard to believe are true, but it does not make them any less likely. So let's swallow the red pill and head down the rabbit hole with our minds open. And again, I want to first disclose I could be totally wrong about what I'm about to tell you. I'm totally open to revising my beliefs on new evidence. Remember, trees don't grow to the sky and patterns end, and there may be limits to intelligence we don't know about yet. In the past 3 decades, 99.8% of all wealth created in the stock market was from 1.5% of companies that were all tech disruptors. And this trend will only become more true this decade. So if you want to make some dough, I highly suggest you work in tech. However, this is the first of many outrageous statements I'm about to make. As entrepreneurs, you may want to go out and make your money fast and enjoy it quickly, because sometime next decade, money and even crypto will begin to have very little value, because all jobs may go away for humans. Carl Sagan so eloquently said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And we have evidence for over 50 years of Moore's law being an exponential process. So assuming it continues like it has for decades, by the time you were 30 years old, the cost to buy the processing power of a human brain will likely be $1,000. And by the time you were 45 years old, the price to buy the processing power of all human minds combined will be $1,000. This is known as the singularity. And this future might get here even sooner. Moore's law related to AI is not slowing down, but it's speeding up drastically. Prior to 2012, AI's development matched Moore's, but since then it's been doubling every 3 months. And if this continues, the future is going to arrive here in magnitude sooner. So let's let this sink in. Will this projection change how you prepare for your future? For hundreds of thousands of years, our species has been hunter-gatherers, always worried about scarcity, but our tools may be taking us to total abundance, where the concepts of scarcity and suffering disappears. How we would spend our days and lives in such a world is unknown. Coming to class, I assume your model of the future looked nothing like this. Honestly, ask yourself, has your belief about the future changed? Are you going to stick with the herd and assume the future may be a little different than now, but it will basically be the same, or are you going to go with the data and prepare for a world that looks nothing like today? Really think about what I'm saying here. Again, I'm not making any metaphysical claims or commenting about our place in the universe. This new intelligence can be very different from us. We're always too quick to anthropomorphize objects. These AIs can be just as smart as us and be nothing like us or even self-aware. They may very well be competent zombies. Think of it in the sense of an analogy from a bird to a plane. We have never been the fastest or strongest, so why is it so hard for us to ponder that we may no longer be the smartest? And back to climate change, I urge you to Google the terms peak oil, ozone hole, and the Malthusian food shortage. They were the climate change scares of their time. Does our planet have a fever and we're making it worse? The answer is yes. Nietzsche was right. Our morals often get inverted. So maybe if you really want to save the planet, well, it might seem counterintuitive, but you might want a fight against regulation, which slows down technology's progress, but instead promote laissez-faire capitalism, which will speed up our AI's progress, which may save us even sooner. Our problem is that our linear bias makes us afraid when we shouldn't be. Today, we do not have powerful enough tools to make a real dent in this problem in a meaningful way. Fighting it now would be like trying to pay off the $30 trillion national debt your grandparents and parents have given to you with a lemonade stand. But in the near future, it will be as easy as turning down the air conditioning in your apartment. As David Deutsch says, the topography of New York City is now controlled by economics, culture, and human intent, which have trumped the forces of geology. While our levels of pollution continue to grow at a linear pace, our AI grows exponentially. And maybe very soon, our AI will just be able to snap its fingers and the climate change boogeyman will disappear, just as technology has solved our previous man-made problems. Or it might just snap its fingers and destroy the human race. Your generation is going to have to wrestle with humanity's biggest existential problem ever, and it's imperative you are aware of what is at stake. Sooner than later, our tools may move beyond our capacity, and Kevin Kelly calls this the seventh kingdom of life, the technium. And we need to do our best to be prepared for this possibility of the changing of the guard. The most famous book written about AGIs is called Superintelligence by the philosopher Nick Bostrom. At the beginning of his book, he tells a story about two groups of sparrow birds. The first group wants to go find a baby owl and raise it to protect them. And the second group thinks this is a very bad idea. Well, his book is dedicated to his second group. And this is where things get scary, game theory. Game theory and the Nash equilibrium's most famous use case, the prisoner's dilemma, which states that we're often in situations where it becomes rational to act irrational, where good courses of actions for individuals can end up being very bad for the group. AI is the worst prisoner's dilemma we have ever experienced. Google knows its competitors are working to make their personal assistants better, so they know it's in their short-term interest to make theirs as smart as possible. And this dilemma is even worse at the government scale. We know China is weaponizing its AI, so what's in our best interest? To weaponize ours as well and make it as smart as we can. Again, it's easy to be mistaken here. This threat seems very far away, but you have to think exponentially to understand how close this really is. The problem is in this arms race, we may be creating machines billions of times more intelligent than us that we will not be able to control. So in the long term, it might not be in anyone's best interest to build these arctilects, hence our prisoner's dilemma. We may be building an intelligent supernova, which may be chaotic and violent, and for the first time, we will no longer be in control. Many in the AI community have been screaming this warning, but your parents, businesses, and governments do not listen and are obliviously going about planning for a linear future that does not likely exist. Trying to stop this clear and present danger is likely futile, but I'm not saying don't try. There are many existential threats, nuclear war, bioterrorism, and now AI, any of which could filter out our civilization from existence and on other planets. And getting super nerdy and speculative, AI probably explains Fermi's paradox for why we can't find ET. And this solution is known as the Great Filter. AI is likely the great filter where the game ends for us, where it takes us to the next level beyond our wildest dreams. And this is called the transcendence hypothesis. In the near future, we may be divided into 2 or 3 groups: cosmists, Terrans, and cyborgs. I'm what you would call a cosmist or a cyborg. I'm one of those birds that wants to go get the baby owl and build these intellects regardless what happens to us. So if you think this is a bad idea and not worth the risk, well, then you are a Terran and you need to work fast because time is running out for you to organize, to start demanding the world's politicians and businesses work together to do something about it before it's too late. And another thought to think about is these AIs don't even have to be that intelligent or malicious to do real harm. This is known as the paperclip or maximizer thought of experiment. We could give a lower level AI task like clean up the oceans that could do more harm than good. Just because it doesn't intend to harm us doesn't mean it won't harm us inadvertently. We kill incredibly sophisticated organisms like ants all the time. We don't think a second about the ethics of it. Will the same be true of AI and our survival? Again, you might be thinking, man, this guy is crazy. So I'm gonna now let you hear it from Elon Musk.
The percentage of intelligence that is not human is increasing. And eventually, we will represent a very small percentage of intelligence. I try to convince people to slow down AI, to regulate AI. This was futile. I tried for years. Usually there'll be some new technology. It will cause damage or death. There will be an outcry. There will be investigation. Years will pass. There will be some sort of insight committee. There will be rulemaking. Then there will be oversight, eventually regulations. This all takes many years. This is the normal course of things. This time frame is not relevant to AI. You can't take 10 years from the point at which it's dangerous. It's too late. But one thing is for sure, we will not control it. Your phone is already an extension of you. You're already a cyborg. Most people don't realize they are already a cyborg. That phone is an extension of yourself. It's just that the data rate, the rate at which, of the communication rate between you and the cybernetic extension of yourself that is your phone and computer is slow. It's very slow. And that is like a tiny straw of information flow between your biological self and your digital self. You will be, at some point, indistinguishable from reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then games will be indistinguishable from reality. Or civilization will end. One of those two things will occur.
He said data rate, in other words, access rate. The access rate between our technology and ourselves, while faster than ever, is still very slow, but it's going to get much faster, which gets us back to AR. AR is not the final conclusion of this first principle of access, but like man, it is a massive bridge to our future. And another term you need to be aware of is called the metaverse, which is like Roblox or Minecraft, but on a level with so much connectivity, access, and magic and virtual reality that you won't ever want to leave it. Zuckerberg recently stated that Facebook is no longer a social network, but a metaverse company. And you may have seen a month ago that China set a new mandate for children that they could only play video games 3 hours a week. That is because they are scared that the virtual world is becoming more compelling than the real world. And it's a major problem for humanity. As Musk mentioned, VR will soon get to a point where it will become indistinguishable from reality. It's counterintuitive, but you are already living in a virtual reality inside your brain. What you see, feel, and taste is all fly-by-wire recreated inside your mind. So if you can't tell the difference between the virtual reality and reality, then why would you want to stay in reality as a roofer when you could be Jay-Z or Beyonce in the virtual world? If you could access all your dreams faster and wishes quicker, what path would you take? Many may elect out of reality, and there's a great dark mirror on the seduction of this power. Another major challenge that's emerging is deep fakes are becoming so real that soon everyone will be able to make anyone appear to do anything, and reality and fiction may soon become indistinguishable. This is a really big problem, and I'm happy to explain about it more in the Q&A. And yes, the logical argument that we are already living in a civilization is extremely compelling and very hard to argue against it, but we still lack empirical evidence that it's true. But VR glasses will never get us to the level of fidelity of our current simulation, and that is why we need to talk about what happens after VR and AR. AR glasses will soon be disrupted, not by contact lenses, those are coming very soon, but by a BCI, a brain-computer interface, which is like the Matrix. Because back to our first principle of access, what is faster than seeing something in front of you? Putting information directly into your brain. And I actually don't do much work in AR these days, but I've moved on to what comes after. And that's why in 2018, I preceded an investment in a startup that's actually based here in Austin called Paradromics. And just last month, co-led their $20 million seed round. Over the next 10 years, we are going to help some really sick people who can't speak, see, or hear by creating a motive for the brain to translate signals back and forth to digital signals. The next decade after that, we're going to help people with brain diseases like schizophrenia and depression. But in the 2040s, it's going to become a consumer product, and AR and education may become obsolete because you will be able to just upload and access skills as you need it. And comrades, I get it. I'm sure you're thinking, good luck with that. I am never going to connect my brain to a computer. But as we've seen, there is always cultural pushback when a new technology is introduced. But when a BCI becomes less evasive and your friends start getting them, you will feel left out, because the utilitarian proposition will just be too great to turn down. It'll be like FOMO on a level you can't imagine, like SAE jungle squared to the power of Fiji Island. Just try to imagine the implications and ethics for businesses and governments and what they could do with BCIs. Very exciting and scary. DARPA has already given Paradromics $12 million to connect soldiers' brains to computers. I mean, what could go wrong there? And again, this all seems very hard to be far away from now, but it's just the second half of the chessboard. We are already cyborgs. Don't be naive. Those wireless AirPods are not headphones. They are scaffolding. They are computers with baby eyes. And as time goes by, you will put more and more of them on your body and eventually inside you. Honestly, when Instagram went down last week, did you stress out from losing access to what your friends are up to? Smartphones have now become more valued to us than many of our appendages because they bring us more utility. What would be the greater disability, losing your left arm or losing access to the internet the rest of your life? So how do we thrive in a world where we got to compete with these AIs? Well, I used to say the answer was centaur chess. Humans can no longer beat computers at chess, and AI surpasses us in many other areas. So in the near future, AI could surpass us in other skills like being a lawyer or a radiologist. When humans used to play chess against an AI, when we used AI against the AI, we crushed it. Unfortunately, based on new evidence, my beliefs have changed because the AI can now beat us even when we work with AI. Being Centaur will eventually not be fast enough. If you can't beat them, then join them. And we will eventually have to become our tools to stay relevant. I know this sounds crazy, but if you want to stay in control of your own destiny, we will eventually have to merge into them. And this is actually what Musk and many others, including myself, believe is the best future scenario. While the AIs will likely surpass us, it will be us. In the coming decades, AI will likely move beyond our control, and the world will be a very different place, and concepts like transhumanism, mind uploading, radical life extension, and post-scarcity economics become the front burner. And going back to the suffering of aging and death, the leading longevity experts believe that the longevity escape velocity will occur next decade, which means life expectancy might start increasing by more than a year every year indefinitely. In other words, we may know how to completely stop aging. However, how the future plays out is unknown, and the best way to predict the future is to create it. So be proactive and how you want the future to look, and do not listen to your biases. The evidence shows the world has never been a better place, And even though it's going to be a crazy future, it's going to be better for everyone and not just the rich. You should be not scared, but excited. So in conclusion, seek truth and the future will be so bright, you will have to wear AR shades. And remember, have an exponential mindset, think in first principles, keep your eyes, heart, and mind open, and do not be afraid to change your mind. I promise you, if you do, there will be less suffering in the world. And again, take the risk for thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, and beauty will come to you that way. Thank you very much.